Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 12 this episode for you. All into one, just make one big show this morning. Are listed in the description of this video for your convenience. And if you need to pull them up to take a look at something for your own research, or sometimes there's some interesting comments or some video or something that you might want to take a look at in these. So we'll jump right on into it if we can here. First one here to cooperate with me. This is off a Conservative Tribune, and these are in no particular order. Grabbed them and put them together here for you this morning. This says top Dem refuses to filibuster Trump's SCOTUS pick. It says even before the president too much, quit it. Okay. Well, mother of pearl, slow down. It says even before President Donald Trump announced that he was nominating Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court, Senate Democrats were already promising that they would oppose Pitt. Democrat West Virginia Senator Joe McCutcheon party's insanity and stated that he wouldn't take part in any filibuster to block Trump's nominee, the Weekly Standard reported. I'm not going to filibuster anybody. On Tuesday, before Trump had announced his pick, it's nice to see a Democrat having a little backbone and standing up to his party's leadership. Jeff Merkley has vowed that he will filibuster Trump's nomination, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has indicated he's on board with that. Republicans only have 52 seats in the Senate, so in addition to Manchin, 7 other Democrats would need to join all Republicans to reach the 60-vote threshold necessary to end any filibuster. That after Trump announced his nominee, the state went for Trump in November and is considered to be vulnerable in the upcoming 2018 elections, appeared willing to give Gorsuch a fair hearing. In this one, I try to get it to stop so I can finish reading the article here when they just want to jump right in there on me. Next one says, or it goes on, says, let's give the man a chance. Talk to him. My goodness, Manchin said Wednesday on MSNBC's Morning Joe. Don't shut it down before we even get started. Right. Manchin also stated that he isn't in favor of the so-called nuclear option, which would do away with filibuster for Supreme Court nominees and require only a simple majority vote of 51 votes to advance Gorsuch's nomination. If Manchin truly wants to work across the aisle, or was adopting this posture only because he was worried about his re-election chances in 2018. Everything they can so far to show or to slow the confirmations of Trump's cabinet nominees, and there's no reason to believe that they won't do the same thing for this Supreme Court nominee. Hopefully there are more senators like Manchin out there who are willing to work across the aisle to give Gorsuch a chance. Halves off of Liberty Riders, and it says Trump's going nuclear. The Democrats are done for after he drops this bombshell. Donald Trump has just issued invoked that doesn't make any sense, but that's what it says. Donald Trump has just invoked the nuclear option on the Supreme Court of the United States. He told a room full of conservatives that he is ready to pull the trigger if Democrats refuse his nominee. End up with that gridlock, I would say, if you can, Mitch, go nuclear, because that would be an absolute shame if a man of his quality was put up to that neglect. The nuclear option Trump is referring to is a tactic devised by the Democrats back in 2013 that would allow the Senate rules of nomination from 60, and it says 60/100 to a simple majority. Republicans currently hold 52 seats. The option is not ideal. When the Democrats tried this before, Republicans fought back hard to stop the tactic. It would be a shame to have to use it ourselves now. We cannot afford to wait another 4 to 8 years before we get any Supreme Court justices appointed. That's just nuts. If you think the Democrats should just do their job and confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch, then share this everywhere. Next one that I have here, journalism.com, and it says Rand Paul, problem with immigration deeper than Trump's order. Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, offered a logical alternative Tuesday to the protest greeting President Donald Trump's executive order barring residents of 7 countries of terrorism from entering the U.S. People ought to step back and agree that there's a problem in order to decide whether we like the solution. NBC's Morning Joe. Paul said Europe has provided a lesson in what can happen when the system fails. In this, and there, Morning Joe tweets, Rand Paul, 40% of people who come to visit our country on a visa overstay their visas. Continues, it says, in Europe, 1 million people went to Germany, some of them presented with one name and no papers, Paul said. So if you call back to Syria and say, my name is so-and-so, and you ask for the agency to check this person with one name, there's no agency. Chaos over there, or it's chaos over these people is very, very difficult. And I think we need to do more vetting of people coming with one name from various countries in the Middle East. Was among those battling Trump for the Republican presidential nomination and has been quick to criticize him when the views of the two diverge. He said Trump is addressing a problem, which is exactly what Trump said he would do. Or I was told about 400 times over a year and a half that he was going to do this. So I guess I'm not surprised. It was not specifically consulted, or I was not specifically consulted, and obviously there are some things that didn't go perfectly, Paul said. However, Americans need to look past the glitches of the past weekend, he said, and the problem is pretty clear that about 40% of the people who come to visit our country on visa overstay their visas, and we have no idea where they are, he said. Stopping the flow of travelers while the system is assessed and overhauled makes sense. I think you have to pause the system from areas of high risk for terrorism until you can prove the system, he said. Overall, I do believe exchange with other cultures is good. People going back and forth is good. Trade is good, yes, he said. All of these things are good, but I think you have to make sure the system is working. One that I have here is off of GOP, the Daily Dose. Get the ads off of it so we can read it. Okay, it says, guess who? New report exposes 6 top Republicans on George Soros's payroll. Just out, some major Republicans have been caught cheat of George Soros. The report assessed financial records from the Soros Fund and found that not only was the former Nazi socialist financing most of the Democrat liberal nut jobs, but that it was also stroking some 13 different Republicans. A nonprofit, nonpartisan research group, which is based out of Washington, D.C., has published a list which looks like a list of who's who in the Republican Party. Of course, at the top of the list are some names that you will recognize from recent events. You know, the jerks that keep going behind our president's back and trying to make him look bad or full support from his programs. List is our old friend, the Vietnam War hero, Senator John McCain, who seems intent on stabbing his country in the back just like the good old days. Treasonous groups, Marco, which is, or which way is the wind blowing, Rubio, by Paul's no tax relief Ryan, and John should I have the nominee Kasich. But the Soros list also includes other names which explain a lot, like everyone's favorite Bush Jeb. You can also quickly find John Boehner and even compromising Lindsey Graham. The report revealed that while George Soros is busy funding almost all the Democrats, his influence has even penetrated the ranks of the so-called opposition to its very significant extent. Not surprisingly, All of the names revealed to receive funding from George Soros have been a record of openly opposing Mr. Trump, but as president. All have at one time or another taken cheap shots at Mr. Trump's plans and his character and have track record of president. And the interesting new addition to the payoff list, along with Marco Rubio, is Carlos Curbelo, also of Florida. Even as Senator McCain continues to attempt to backstab and embarrass the president and his policies on the world stage, we have now proof to do with what he feels is right, but what he feels will get him the most money from George Soros. In fact, it's come to light that McCain has been on the Soros payroll for the last 16 years. In 2001, McCain founded the Alexandria, Virginia-based Reform Institute as a vehicle to receive funding from George Soros. And Teresa Hines carries, her husband in Vietnam, and several other prominent nonprofit organizations. The Institute to promote his political agenda and provide remuneration to staff and key campaign operatives between the elections. McCain's treachery gets much worse. According to TPM, in 2002, the Open Society Institute gave $300,000 in grants to various groups that were defending McCain's campaign finance law against a deluge of legal challenges defending McCain from financial ruin. Obvious that the good senator has been bought and paid for by George Soros. No wonder he spent the election season railing against Trump and defending Soros's agenda. And there's some video in this if you want to pull it up to take a look at it. Can't make this stuff up. Here is off of the Common Sense Show by Dave Hodges, and it says, "Enemies within. President Trump is in extreme danger." President Trump may have escaped the clutches of Hillary Clinton, but can he escape the dangers posed by the Democratic Communist Party, who are agents of the globalists and whose main goal is the destruction of the United States? The following compromise the hit team who want to take him out and subjugate the American people. President Trump faces an unthinkable challenge. He's not only faced with dealing with over 80 congressmen who are members of front organizations for the Communist Party and the Muslim Brotherhood, he has many of these philosophical traitors to the Republic serving in senior and mid-level management in the various agencies of the federal government. In other words, the president is surrounded by traitors who are dedicated to the destruction of the United States. Their traitors are your enemy, whether you realize it or not. Please allow me to superficially review how extensive the treason to the Republic is. This will be followed up by a stunning revelation as the end of the article. Treason in our midst. Was anyone else bothered by the fact the large body count of Democratic congressmen who did not attend the inauguration? These unpatriotic congressmen were led by the very radicalized John Lewis. Lewis belongs to the Progressive Caucus, which is a clear front organization for the Communist Party, as are the other disloyal congressmen. At a minimum, I'm concerned because these congressmen demonstrated that they will not work with this president. This is troublesome because the Congress and the president must work together for the good of the country. At maximum, I'm concerned about this development because questions about these congressmen are being asked by my audience with regard to their real motivation. Many of my readers and viewers are questioning if these congressmen want to simply be out of the blast zone for what is coming. In other words, they're positioning themselves to survive the coup that's coming. New Zealand journalist Trevor Loudon documents through his new documentary entitled The Enemies Within, how the Communist Party of the USA itself has adopted to achieve revolutionary goals by the decisions made in the 1970s to inflate and manipulate the Democratic Party. Loudon's newest work documents how Lewis is a member of several front organizations with strong ties to the Communist Party. The Communist and Muslim Brotherhood infiltration plan is to form alliances with the radical elements in the organized labor in conjunction with radicals in the African American community and the feminist movement to establish a progressive coalition on the left that could dominate the national political agenda for decades to come. John Lewis is a member of the Progressive Caucus, which is a front group for the Communist Party. Lewis is not alone, but his actions and allegiances speak to his lack of commitment to the Republic and, most importantly, the Constitution of the United States. With these associations and his continual efforts in dividing the country, this congressman should resign. Our country has reached its saturation point with treason from its public officials. Lewis has lost all credibility. Former Congressman Allen West has identified 80 of the congressmen as being or belonging to front groups for either the Communist Party or the Muslim Brotherhood or both. The Deputy Chief of Staff to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin. This section is not about Muslims serving in the White House. America has no problem with this as long as they uphold their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. This section is also not about the embarrassed and disgraced wife of deposed Congressman Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin has undeniable ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. In an interview with Front Page Mag, anti-Islamist activist and author Waleed Shobat explained that Huma's mother, Salihah Abedin, is and was deeply involved with the Muslim Brotherhood, and that Huma's brother Hassan is on the board of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, or the OCIS, where he is a fellow and partners with other board members, including Al-Qaeda associate Omar Nassif and the notorious Muslim Brotherhood leader Sheikh Yusuf Qadri. Both have been listed as the OCIS trustees. Has the FBI stopped vetting federal governmental employees in highly sensitive positions? Department of Homeland Security Deputy Mayor Arif Alahan. In the publication Discovers the Networks, the editors discuss the background as it relates to highly sensitive federal agency employment, DHS, and the Muslim terrorist affiliations of Arif Alahan. Alahan's resume is very impressive. Former Deputy Mayor of Homeland Security and Public Safety for the City of Los Angeles, was responsible for derailing the LAPD's plan to monitor activities with the Los Angeles Muslim community, was appointed as Assistant Secretary for the Office of Policy Development in Barack Obama's Department of Homeland Security in 2009, became Professor of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism in 2010, now serving as a distinguished visiting professor at the National Defense University. Alahan was responsible for derailing the LAPD's efforts to monitor radical and potential terrorist activities within the city's Muslim community, where numerous radical mosques were known to have provided aid and comfort to the 9/11 hijackers. Alahan has openly, a devout Sunni Muslim, has openly participated in a Muslim Public Affairs Council fundraiser titled Be the Change in order to support that organization's leadership development programs, which openly advocates for Sharia law takeover of the United States. The open support for this Sharia law intention to overthrow the U.S. government on the part of the American citizen is illegal. When such an advocate is a federal employee in a sensitive position, this person should disqualify one from holding sensitive positions within the government. Obama Administration Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, Ibu Patel. If you were on the FBI team vetting presidential appointees, would you grant your seal of approval to the grandson of the Muslim Brotherhood's founder, Sirajah Wajah, who was named as the co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and who has defunded the convicted World Trade Center bombers? Well, somebody thought Ibu Patel, the man in question, would make a splendid member of Obama's Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Additionally, Patel himself spoke at a Muslim Students Association and ISNA convention while appearing on a panel and also being partnered with Tariq Ramadan. Ramadan is the grandson of Sirajal Wajah, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing these names correctly. I'm giving it my best shot. It says, who was named as a possible co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and has defended the convicted World Trade Center bombers. Wajah advocates for the Islamic takeover of America under the banner of Sharia law. All of these people combined, plus George Soros, are poised to overthrow this government, and the intention to do so extends deep into every agency. Obama had 8 years to plant subversive time bombs. State Department employee Monica Wesolowski, I think that is. For the past 72 hours, I have covered a case of the State Department's employee Monica Wesolowski. Though an offhanded, unintentional comment, Monica revealed that the State Department brochures obfuscate the presence of child sex trafficking inside the territorial boundaries of the USA. Since I published the two-part story about Monica, I've heard from several federal employees who verify the aforementioned concern, and further, they make claims that part of our federal government are actually involved in facilitating child sex trafficking, and other people's resources are involved. So there you have that information. Wow. Next one we have here is off of mishtalk.com, and it says, time to stop illegal, immoral, unconstitutional drone policy of Bush, Obama, and Trump. By what right does the U.S. have to bomb the hell out of in obvious acts of war without even declaring war? Such actions are illegal, immoral, unconstitutional, hypocritical, and downright stupid. The latter because we make more enemies than we kill in the process. Who would not be radicalized by seeing their own son or daughter blown to smithereens by a U.S. drone? The hypocrisy alone is amazing. Warmonger-in-chief Senator John McCain said Russia's meddling in U.S. elections is a form of warfare. Here's the reality. McCain has blood on his hands for his intervention interference in the Ukraine. McCain labeled Putin a thug, a murderer, and a killer. Using McCain's own logic, the same label ought to be applied to Trump, Obama, Bush, Hillary, and of course McCain himself. Trump is talking with Putin. I believe sanctions will be removed. That's positive action and one Hillary would not have taken. Small price equals killed. Mainstream media sat in silence for 8 years when Obama issued life or death sentences on innocent civilians. Now the media moans about Trump. I wish the warmonger hypocrites would place themselves in other people's shoes just once. If their son or daughter was killed by a drone or their house blown to smithereens, they would not consider it a small price to pay for U.S. security. Note that the media called it collateral damage when Obama drone killed a 12-year-old boy in Yemen. When Trump fired drone killed an 8-year-old girl in Yemen, the media took a closer look. Here's the real story. 2 weeks after the killing of Awaki, a separate CIA drone strike in Yemen killed this 16-year-old American-born son, Abdurrahman, along with the boy's 17-year-old cousin and several other innocent Yemenis. The U.S. eventually claimed that the boy was not their target, but merely collateral damage. Abdurrahman's grief-stricken grandfather, Nasser al-Awaki, urged the Washington Post to visit a Facebook memorial page for Abdurrahman, which explained, look at his pictures, his friends, his hobbies. His Facebook page shows a typical kid. U.S. sides with Saudi Arabia over, good golly. Try that again. U.S. sides with Saudi Arabia over Yemen. Saudi Arabia provokes Yemen, then the U.S. backed Saudi Arabia. Why? Arguably, it would have made as much sense to back Yemen. It was Saudi nationals, not Iranians, not Iraqis behind 9/11. Instead of going to war with Saudi Arabia, we blew up Iraq. ISIS is a U.S. creation. For all the finger pointing at Russia and the carnage in Syria, this mess mostly attributable to the U.S., which directly sponsored the carnage by backing allegedly moderate al-Qaeda terrorists. These terrorists teamed up with and gave us weapons, or gave U.S. weapons to ISIS. Let's not forget that ISIS is a U.S. creation. Note that the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair admitted ISIS is a U.S.-UK creation. President George W. Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney are to blame, but President Obama continued their policies, as has Trump. Hillary would have done the same, if not more, had she been elected. Are the protests? There aren't any, and there won't be any, because media sits in silence and U.S. citizens sit in cocoons unaware of anything that happens outside the U.S. Trump's saber-rattling Iran. Trump is now saber-rattling Iran. I suspect Hillary would have done the same thing. There has not been a war Hillary did not support, with Congress going along. In totally disgusting state stance on war and peace, House Speaker Paul Ryan said he would engage Iran militarily in advance. Iran is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. They've dedicated themselves to wiping an entire country off the map. It's a blatant lie, which Republicans often repeat. What Iran really said, please see, peace must be stopped at any cost, lies and hypocrisy on Iran. And it's a link you can click here in this article. Here's a short version. It was a translation error. Common sense from Patrick Buchanan. Patrick Buchanan talks of the coming clash with Iran. Please read that article. And again, if it does not immediately ring a bell, Iran is not in violation of anything. It's another Gulf of Tonkin incident, Saudi style, with the U.S. siding with the nation directly sending the most money to ISIS. War must go on. The warmongers insist war must go on. If we don't have an enemy, we need to create one to ensure perpetual war. There is no U.S. outrage over this because no U.S. citizen has been recently killed. U.S. citizens do not give a damn about collateral damage, no matter how severe outside the U.S. Policy dictates we keep bombing the hell out of the world, making enemies where they do not exist until blowback occurs. Following blowback, the public rallies around the war. The next article that I have for you is off the allnewspipeline.com, and it says, is Trump purging the enemies within? Obama loyalists being escorted out of the White House. Appears to have been an honest mix-up. Reports came out this week that Secret Service manager level staff was forced to resign this week, but after clarification, it was determined that it wasn't Secret Service that was forced to resign and was escorted from the White House, but it was in reality members of cybersecurity, information security, including the chief of information security at the White House. It began when Steve Clemons, political and foreign policy commentator, Washington editor-at-large, associated with the Atlantic National Journal and contributor at MSNBC, sent the following tweet out on February the 2nd of 2017, stating reports coming in that some Secret Service manager level position or personnel forced to resign tonight and escorted out of the EEOB. Two out, but sources say more. That was immediately followed up by another report from Clemens stating, repeat, two and perhaps more Secret Service manager level staff abruptly forced to resign tonight and escorted out of EEOB. And it shows the tweets here. And says the EEOB refers to the Eisenhower Executive Office building, which houses a majority of offices for White House staff. The next morning, Clemens followed up with a series of tweets admitting his error and reporting it was Secret Service that was forced to resign and escorted off the premises, but in reality, members of the White House security who share space with the Secret Service. Between his original tweet and his clarifications, other reports on his initial assertion that it was Secret Service that was removed, to the point where the Secret Service agency spokeswoman was forced to issue a denial, stating the report regarding the Secret Service personnel is absolutely false. A purge of Secret Service that would have been a big story, especially after reports regarding one agent who had publicly stated she would not take a bullet for President Trump, resulting in her suspension with pay pending an investigation. But the real story here is that it was the White House security chief, who was an Obama political appointee, announced in September of 2016 by the White House website, also referred to as the first ever cyber chief. Fortune magazine reported in September of 2016, Tohill will lead a team within the White House's offices of management and budget that conduct periodic cyberstat reviews with federal agencies to ensure that implementation plans are effective and achieve the desired outcome, said Scott, the U.S. Info Chief, and Michael Daniel, U.S. Cybersecurity Coordinator, in a jointly authorized blog post announcing the news. Tohill will be responsible for helping to ensure the right set of policies, strategies, and practices are adopted across agencies, they said. The timing of this seems quite coincidental on the heels of immigration pause rollout, preventing immigrants from countries considered security threats due to high levels of terrorist activities, which has led to lawsuits against the executive order, with one judge halting the pause and Trump's administration vowing to fight it, has largely been criticized due visa and green card holders being denied entry into the United States or detained upon arrival, when those holders were not supposed to be part of the pause. It was a botched rollout, as has been suggested by critics, or try that again. Was it a botched rollout, as has been suggested by critics, or was there a deliberate intra-agency communication issue which led to the chaos that ensued shortly after the EO was signed and implementation started? Not knowing the exact specific responsibilities that fall under the first federal chief information security officer and his department within the White House, I cannot answer that, but the timing of these purges are suspicious. On top of the previous firing of the acting Attorney General Sally Yates, another hold over from the Obama administration after she issued a kamikaze attack on her new boss, refusing to defend his executive order in the courts, along with purging Obama's border control chief, been accused by members of the union that represent the U.S. Border Patrol agents, the National Border Patrol Council, of being a disgrace, and by tying their hands in regards to doing their jobs, as well as advocating lax immigration enforcement. Perhaps the most interesting part of this apparent purge of the Obama loyalist appointees in positions to betray and work against the new administration is how the mainstream media is avoiding the fact that the White House security chief, along with an unspecified number of members of the cybersecurity, information security, were not only forced to resign, but were actually escorted out of the EEOB. Past year and a half has told us anything. It is that when the MSM doesn't want something known, it's usually something we, the people, should know more about. So their avoidance of any major headlines regarding this is quite worrisome. Bottom line, all administrations deliberately leak certain details for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they allow a leak in order to basically offer an unofficial warning to the public about what's coming. Other times they float possible actions anonymously in order to gauge the public's reaction. The most damning leaks are those that reveal private conversations and plans with the sole goal by the leaker to cause trouble for an agenda or proposal they disagree with politically. With a consistent stream of media headlines claiming that there are unprecedented amounts of latter types of leaks coming from the White House, with mainstream media gleefully claiming there is distrust and confusion, implying the Trump administration is paranoid about traitors in their midst. We find that these purges we see are increasing, especially with the MSM studying avoiding reporting on some of them and slanting reports about others. It appears Trump administration is being forced to clean house now that Obama loyalists, rather than slowly replacing people at a more leisurely pace. White House spokesman Sean Spicer was right. These bureaucracies need to either get with the program or get out before they find themselves fired and escorted out the door. While we provide a few screenshots from the Clemens Twitter feed above, in the video below, I went ahead and went through all of them pertaining to the most recent purge in the White House of Obama loyalists. A series of tweets explaining, encouraging others to follow up, and then clarifying exactly who was basically booted out the door, while the media silenced on these forced resignations, red firings, is deafening. President Trump needs to purge all the enemies within if he expects to enforce his agenda and keep his campaign promises without being stabbed in the back at every turn. And there's the video in this if you want to pull that up to take a look at that. The next one is off of BizPac Review. It says, get used to that losing feeling. Pelosi loses final vote to save Cops' pigs artwork in the U.S. Capitol. Put this to bed, but apparently we didn't. Maybe this one will. Disgusting picture. If you haven't seen it, you might want to do a search on it and pull that up. Lord have mercy. I can't make this stuff up. It says, this is what democracy looks like. With a well-documented flair for the dramatic, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi made one last attempt to save an offensive painting depicting police's pigs that was on display at the U.S. Capitol complex. In an appeal to the White House, or try this again, in an appeal to the House Office Building Commission, which consists of Speaker Paul Ryan, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, both Republican, and Pelosi, the San Francisco Democrat challenged a decision by the architect of the Capitol to remove the artwork, according to the Washington Examiner. Predictably, Pelosi lost what futile appeal to herself by a vote of 2-1. Pelosi explained the outcome in a letter to Representative William Lacey Clay, Democrat of Missouri, who displayed the controversial piece as part of a student art competition in his district. I asked the HOBC to agree that removing the painting was wrong and the architect's decision should be reversed, she wrote. I regret that the majority of the HOBC chose to uphold the architect's decision. Pelosi noted that the painting was first to be removed since the competition began in 1982 and said it dishonors our tradition and violates the First Amendment. She didn't comment on the likelihood of the painting may have been the first to openly disrespect law enforcement. The reaction on social media suggests that Pelosi may want to get used to that losing feeling. Here's a sampling of the responses from Twitter. And I won't read them all, but I'll read a few of them here. It says that Pelosi wanted that painting up. A portrait of Kate Steinle should have been placed next to it. Another one says, Nancy Pelosi, she's just butt sore, the hater politics. Another one says, she is an embarrassment. Boy, do I agree with that. And there's a whole list of these if you want to pull them up and take a look at them. And then there's comments to the article here, too. It's pretty good. Next one is off of Conservative Tribune, and it says, no, Hillary's back, announces return to the speaking circuit. Presidential nominee Hillary Clinton has decided to return to the public eye and tour around the country giving speeches. According to the New York Post, Clinton signed on with Harry Walker Agency, an agency that has gotten her at least $200,000 per speech in the past. In 2016, the Daily Caller reported that the former Secretary of State received a standard of $225,000 for a short 20-minute speech. According to The Advocate, the former Democrat presidential nominee has booked 2 appearances so far. Her first appearance will be in mid-February in Manhattan when the U.S. Postal Service uses New York's annual Fashion Week to unveil a new series of stamps to honor fashion designer Oscar de la Renta. In late May, Clinton is scheduled to give the commencement address at her alma mater, Wesley College. But how credible is the former First Lady after the failed presidential campaign and an FBI investigation? One would think that she would book more than 2 speeches in a year. Be why Clinton is also attempting to make money by writing a book. Associated Press, Clinton was working on a book to be published in September that's built around a compilation of favorite quotations she's collected over her career. These quotes have helped me celebrate the good times, laugh at the absurd times, persevere during the hard times, and deepen my appreciation of all life has to offer, Clinton said in a statement, according to the AP. But Clinton might have lost her credibility for millions of Americans when businessman Donald Trump was elected 45th president by the American people. It'll be interesting to see who's willing to pay money to hear advice from a corrupt politician who ran a failed presidential campaign that cost twice as much as her opponent spent. With that kind of record, tour looks just like a Clinton scam in the making. A woman with nothing worthwhile to say charging willing suckers big bucks to listen. Well, there's another sucker born every minute. I'm wondering if they got it wrong. Maybe she has to pay them $225,000 to speak. Wouldn't that be a kick in the head? Oh, man. Next one's off a BizPack review. It says, lame duck, Obama administration hid sharp decline in ICE deportations. In the final months of the outgoing Obama administration, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, officials began quietly hiding evidence, revealing a huge increase in the number apprehended and incarcerated illegal aliens allowed to go free rather than face detention or deportation. In addition to drastically increasing sanctioned catch and release cases in the latter part of former President Barack Obama's second term, ICE also changed its Freedom of Information Act policy to make its already limited flow of data on detainees and detainer-prompted deportations all but impossible to obtain, according to a new Syracuse University Transitional Records Access Clearinghouse report. ICE is now withholding the very same types of data it previously released so that the continued monitoring of its detainer program will be largely prevented, according to this Transitional Record Access Clearinghouse, otherwise known as TRAC, which said it had to file hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, then appeal those requests and file a successful lawsuit to acquire ICE detainer data. ICE began leaving fields of information blank, and that it once routinely provided TRAC in response to monthly FOI requests with no explanation, the report said. But once TRAC researchers obtained the data, it became apparent why the administration might try to conceal its practices about detainers. Written with requests from ICE asking a local jail to detain a person for an extra 48 hours after release so that the federal agents can take the person into custody for deportation. The use of ICE detainers, a practice which grew under former President George W. Bush and during Obama's first term, as well as the number of detained people deported, plummeted in Obama's last few years as president. In other words, ICE officials increasingly allowed arrested illegal immigrants to go free. Once ICE officials detained someone, an increasingly rare trend under Obama, they were far more likely to release that person. ICE has issued 309,697 detainers in 2011, an all-time high. But that plummeted to it plummeted to 95,085 by 2015. Detainers do not guarantee removal. ICE issued more than 5,000 detainers in December of 2015, the most recently available data, but only deported 341 of those people, according to TRAC. Detainers are only one method for deportation. ICE made 235,551 total deportations in 2015, the most recently available data. The number of ICE-initiated criminal prosecutions sunk in Obama's second term. In an unprecedented move, ICE employee union endorsed now President Donald Trump, who's at the time promised to strengthen America's immigration enforcement and let ICE agents do their jobs. Track expects ICE use of detainers to surge under Trump. Examining what detainers actually achieved and did not achieve during the Obama and Bush years is important because under the Trump administration, recent flurry on immigration executive orders, it appears that the use of detainers is likely to surge, Track said. So there you have the information in that article. The next one I have here is off of WCVB.com, and it says, House seeks to end Obama rule on background checks for gun ownership for some. The House scrapped an Obama administration's regulation extending background checks for disabled Social Security recipients mentally incapable of managing their own affairs. The vote to repeal the regulation was 235 to 180. The vote is part of an effort to repeal a handful of regulations issued in President Barack Obama's final months and represents the first step towards strengthening gun ownership under President Donald Trump. There is no evidence suggesting that those receiving disability benefits from the Social Security Administration are a threat to public safety, added Representative Bob Goodlatte, Republican of Virginia, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. The background checks rule established the criteria the Social Security Administration will follow when forwarding names for the criminal background check system. Those fitting the criteria have mental disorders so severe that they cannot work and a need to representative to manage their benefits. The administration projected that the regulation would affect about 75,000 beneficiaries. Once an unelected bureaucrat unfairly adds these folks to the federal background check system, they are no longer able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, he said. After the 2012 school massacre in Newton, Connecticut, Obama directed the Justice Department to provide guidance to agencies regarding information they are obligated to report to background check system. These are not people just having a bad day, Representative Mike Thompson, Democrat of California, said. These are not people simply suffering from depression or anxiety or agoraphobia. These are people with severe mental illness who can't hold any kind of job or make any decisions about their affairs. So the law says very clearly they shouldn't have a firearm. In Newtown, 20 children and 6 educators were shot to death when a gunman entered the Sandy Hook Elementary School on December the 14th of 2012. The gunman had earlier killed his mother inside their home, and he used the gun and ammunition that she had purchased. His mental health problems have been extensively reported since the shooting. Democrats said Republicans are doing the bidding of the National Rifle Association, which opposed the Social Security Administration's rule. Representative Jim McGovern, Democrat of Massachusetts, said his constituents have a right to gun violence. They have a right to protect their loved ones who may use a weapon against themselves or their family members, McGovern said. Republicans are employing a rarely used tool to roll back some of the rules issued in the final months of Obama's tenure. The Congressional Review Act provides a temporary window for a simple majority of both chambers to invalidate the rule. Sign the disapproval measure for
Danita Holmes had planned on watching the Super Bowl with her family from her couch.
Try to get that shut off. Where's that coming from? Playing in there.
Spent the week immersed in activities,
and I don't know where it's coming from.
She'd be in the middle of the action at NRG Stadium. This one question.
Where are you? There you are. Of it. My goodness gracious. Okay, we got that shut off. Now I've lost my place because I had to scroll all over the place to find that. Okay, I think I'm getting close here. Jim McGovern, Democrat of Massachusetts, said his constituents have a right not to be victims of gun violence. They have a right to protect their loved ones who may use weapons against themselves or their family members, McGovern said. Republicans are employing a rarely used tool to roll back some of the rules issued in the final months of Obama's tenure. The Congressional Review Act provides a temporary window for a simple majority of both chambers to invalidate the rule. Trump would have to sign the disapproval measure for a regulation to be. The Social Security Administration regulation also established a process for people to appeal having their names submitted to background check database. But attorneys general from a dozen states wrote to the congressional leaders and said such appeals can take months or years to resolve. They said the regulation violates basic notions of due process by permitting an agency to revoke someone's Second Amendment rights without a hearing. The law also prevents from imposing substantially similar regulations in the future. So there you have that. The final article that I have in this episode is off of oathkeepers.org, and it says, Schumer and his pals campaign hard for Trump's re-election. It's 1968 all over again. Violent protesters are filling the streets, lighting fires, vandalizing private and public property, and beating people without knowing what side those people support. Most likely, there is some spontaneity to the protests of the 1960s. College students did not want to be drafted into the military. Once Nixon ended the draft in 1973, the protests stopped. This time it's different. The protests against Trump and all things conservative and Republican are organized, paid for. The protesters and the vandals recruited and trained by panoply of radical leftist groups, some of them funded by the odious nihilist George Soros. He funded the many groups that recruited the marchers for the Women's Pussy March that took place the day after Trump's inauguration as well. What was the purpose of that march? Unclear. There was no stated purpose beyond hating the newly elected president. Many of the marchers were completely unable to articulate why they were there. Trump had been president for a day, and they were blaming him for every imaginable and imaginary potential blight upon their womanhood. The women who headed up the march, or the woman who headed up the march, Linda Sarsour, is a Muslim Sharia law supporter with a vicious streak. The woman who marched, or the women who marched, were pawns in a very dangerous game. They willingly and unwittingly gave their contact information to a communist group. All of this brings us to the latest rent-a-mobs. What happened at UC Berkeley Wednesday night was appalling. At the home of free speech movement of 1964 through 65, there is no longer even a semblance of respect or reverence for free speech. Mario Savo is rolling over in his grave. A calculated riot took place to prevent Milo Yiannopoulos, a young gay Jewish conservative, from speaking. Protests occur everywhere he appears, and his talks are often canceled for the same reason: militant intolerance. These radical leftists are the new fascists. They have gone so far to the left that they have run smack into Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin on the circles of ideologies. Hitler's Nazism was only a hair's width difference from Stalin's communism anyway. Senator Schumer is playing pitiful fool in this grand hysterical play. He thinks that by crying fake tears over a few detained immigrants from nations known to harbor and train terrorists, he will reinvigorate the Democratic Party. He has never cried over the thousands of Americans killed in Chicago or the hundreds of thousands brutally killed in the Middle East thanks to the policies of Obama and the victims of illegal immigrant criminals. Like Nancy Pelosi, he is absolutely clueless as to how Trump won, so he is doubling down on what he knows, denigrate, disparage, and lie. And the more he plays his part, the more people support Trump and his take on no prisoner style. Keep it up, Chuck. Along with all the professional protesters, you're guaranteeing Trump's re-election, just as the protesters of the 1960s guaranteed Nixon's victory. So that's all I have for you in this article, or in this episode. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that yet, and share this on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. See you later. Have a great day.